Well, for those of you who are our guests this evening, thank you so much for coming. My name is Laura Krushke. I am the current Cal president, and I lead Greentown Acapella here in Madison, Wisconsin. Um, we are really excited to host this event to just give us all a little bit of insight into two lovely individuals who have some really great expertise to bring to all of us. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce them and, wow you all with their stats. So first, I will introduce Ariel. And Ariel, how do you say your last name?
Arbisser. I didn't even think
Arbisser.
about putting an explanation on that one. Yeah.
Well, people murder my last name all the time, so I appreciated that. As you gave us your bio, that you made it clear how you said your first name, but then I was like, but maybe the last name too. So,
Yeah.
so Ariel is a singer, songwriter, vocal coach, and acting instructor based in Ithaca, New York. In the vocal world, she's recognized for her Sing It Like You Mean It, Meisner-based workshops, adjudicating live competitions, and producing the Sing compilation album. She has sung with the Funks, Lady J, and Frisky Business. Outside of acapella, Ariel teaches the Meisner acting technique at the Actors Workshop of Ithaca, coaches students privately, does musical theater, sings with funk, soul, and rock bands, and is on the cusp of releasing her first full-length album. And, just to throw out there that at one point in time, Ariel was a featured soloist at Sing in, I believe, TK gave me the stat. It's 2013. Does that sound right, Ariel? Was it 2013?
I think like
with the Sprinkle Singers.
Oh, with the Swingle Singers. Yeah, sure. 2013.
With the Swingle, yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll go with that, 2013. I'm telling you.
I believe TK. Whatever TK says is true.
It was definitely 2013. That was my That was my last festival's events director. It was definitely that
nice. Thank you.
Sweet. All right, we have confirmation all around. So there we go. So welcome, Ariel. Thank you for joining us tonight. And secondly, we have Dr. Kyle Yampiro, who is a native of Long Island, New York. New York is representing tonight, with a Doctor of Musical Arts degree in voice performance, pedagogy, and literature with a singing health emphasis from James Madison University. In addition to a career singing musical theater, operetta, and choral music, he has previously served on faculty as visiting assistant professor of voice at the University of Memphis, adjunct professor at East Mennonite University, and guest artist at Shenandoah Valley Governor's School, and currently teaches virtual voice lessons with Singing with Lauren. In the a cappella community, he sang with and directed UD Vocal Point and JMU Exit 245, and spent a year singing with Cal's group Delta Capella. Woo! And currently he writes for the Recorded Acapella Review Board, serves as nominations manager for the Acapella Video Awards, and judges for ICCA. Woo! Welcome, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right. So going from here, we have we heard from Jason yet? Has Jason joined us? I have not seen him
make it
work.
Not yet. I sent
make it work.
Notes.
You can always join in late if he makes
Absolutely.
it. Absolutely.
I mean, we're still in the fashionably late department anyway, so it's all right. Now I know we've framed some of this out to set aside time for a bit of a masterclass type session with somebody who has graciously volunteered, and so hopefully that person will be joining us soon. I have a list of questions that I know that the two of you have gone over with TK. I'm gonna just I think I'll start tonight, since our volunteer isn't here, by putting those questions out there, and the two of you can have dialogue with those questions for the folks who are guests with us tonight. And then when Jason goes here, we'll kind of just see where we're at time-wise, and then we can shift gears. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Yeah?
Sure.
All right.
He'll be here in just a few minutes, by the way. He's coming.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, we'll spend our time with a few of these questions then. So, to start off with, what does it mean to have good vocal health? And All right, so this, okay. I'm looking at this list and it's just apparently I can't read tonight. So what would you say? What does it mean to have good vocal health? What is your viewpoint on that?
All right. So I'll get started a little bit on that. There's that's
cool.
We talked through some of these questions the other night, and this might have been one of my lengthier answers. So buckle up. So good. What does it mean to have good vocal health? Well, a lot of this, no matter what style it is that you sing in, good vocal health can be largely broken down to two different places. So good vocal health and good vocal hygiene. Vocal health being the way that you use your voice, and vocal hygiene being the way that you care for your voice. And that is in no way, shape, or form disconnected with how you take care of your body, because unlike other instruments, the voice is inextricably linked to your body. You've had it your whole life, you only get one. Whereas another instrument is external. So there is a lot there. There's a lot to take in from just those two things, but both of those contribute largely to what one would consider to be vocal health. Now, I'm going to start with a kind of a mantra that Ariel and I kind of came up with. That is to say, we're in some funky times. The commercials that you hear on TV might tell you that they're unprecedented.
Uncertain even.
You might have heard they're uncertain, they're unprecedented times, and can be very confusing right now. And so I think a lot of how we're going to relate this maintaining vocal health masterclass and discussion is in relation to now, because we don't just get to go back to a magical time that existed 6 months ago. Yes, some of the core concepts of vocal health and wellness are the same, but their application is definitely different in this time. And I want to start by saying, wherever it is you are in your vocal journey, wherever it is, if you are feeling a little down and out and don't feel like singing some days or some parts of a day, honor where it is that you are, wherever that is. If you don't feel like singing, don't force yourself to. And if you do and you haven't sung before, then there may be some ways to sort of help you to run a longer race rather than just sort of sprint in one day. Because there is a little bit of a danger with, like, all of a sudden, finally the skies have opened up, you feel like singing, and then you sing for hours, and then that's not great because you've been atrophied for months. And so there are definitely some mindful ways to go about singing, but the most important thing is really don't try and be someplace that you're not. Like I said before, just honor where you are, and recognize that we are going through a time when there is a lot of studied grief. I mean, whatever your individual experience with the pandemic is. And it really is okay to not want to sing as much as you did, or as much as you know is part of your core. Very important. So before I go into a little bit more about the details of vocal health and hygiene, do you have anything that you'd like to add, Ariel?
No, I mean, I would just say that not only are we maybe not, it's just kind of common sense tangent off of what you were saying, is that not only do we maybe not have the motivation to sing, but we also might not have the opportunity to sing that we had before, right? And to keep in mind that that's okay, and we're pretty much all in that same boat. So whatever you are feeling probably is not completely unique in that sense, and hopefully there's some comfort there, right? It's not to dismiss what you're feeling, it's to say that we're all in this kind of together, and that's why we can have this talk about it. Yeah, go ahead, Co.
Okay, cool. So there are some things that when we started to discuss this a couple of nights ago, we sort of thought, like, a lot of this might feel like common sense, and so it might sound like I'm coming at it from a common sense standpoint, but I also recognize that what is common sense for folks who have based a lot of their career and their life on their singing voice might not be common sense to everyone else. So bear with me if this is, but there might be some information that patently isn't. So vocal hygiene is really massively important in terms of what your upkeep of your voice. Keep in mind that if you have any kind of a job or occupation in which you are using your voice, you are a voice using professional. You don't necessarily have to be a singer or a broadcast radio person. I mean, think about it. If you're using the phone or if you're on Zoom and you're speaking for your job, if you're regular every day using your voice, and that's something to consider. It is not disconnected from your singing. So the way in which you get yourself ready, or the way in which you the breadth and the amount to which you use your voice does impact the overall stamina and the battery life, I suppose, of your voice in that day. So that's something to consider: is how much voice use you have, and how and the quality to which you use your voice. The other really massive thing is what it is that you're putting into your body on the day to day. There are the basic sort of like, how do you take care of your body? Like, are you sleeping a regular amount? Are you sleeping regularly? How much are you trying to sing after just having woken up? But what you put into your body makes a difference. And I'm not saying, there are old adages about like you need to have 8 cups of water a day. And while that is certainly advised as a general healthy standard, the important thing is that you remain somewhat consistent with what you know and what you need. Your level of hydration isn't all to do with how much water you take in. It's largely to do with how much that's balanced with diuretics. Diuretics being things that sort of take water out of you. And so when you hear about diuretics, most commonly you'll probably hear about sugary drinks, alcohol, coffee. Those are some very common things that you can do that sort of dehydrate you, because the sugars and the caffeine, they essentially remove water or hydration from you. It's more a balance. Are you erring more toward the side of things that are hydrating you versus things that aren't? Now, also keep in mind that chugging a couple of bottles of water before you're going to sing doesn't just hydrate you. In fact, usually hydration occurs a couple of hours before you're about to use it for hydration to truly set in. And that's not necessarily going to just shock your system and set you right. It's sort of the way that I like to think about it is weather versus climate. It's not what you do on one day, it's the aggregate of many days. And that's going to really set you up for any kind of success in terms of keeping your folds lubricated and healthy. So vocal hygiene in that way, very important. And if you are feeling like you're not really with it, the other thing is, like, other things that you might be, did you start a new medication? Is that maybe something to consider in terms of how much hydration you need? And I'm not going to prescribe, again, 8 cups a day, great. But I'm not going to prescribe, because based on like different bodily functions, bodily needs, what is normal for you might be different from someone else. But just know thyself and be cognizant of what it is that you are putting in your body, and know that it is all interconnected. So then there's the other elephant in the room, right? Which is vocal health, how it is that you're using your voice. Warm-ups will be different for each person, what you need to do in order to warm up. But one thing that we've both discussed is this: going from 0 to 60 is one of the more dangerous things that you can do, and that is when you can really harm yourself. It's very easy to maybe know yourself and go from 0 to 60 when you're on a tour or you're on a run of concerts, and exactly, like, your singing has become more routine. You've been doing it every day. It's probably a little bit easier to get things up and running because it was just up and running before. But in this time, just about every vocalist I know took a little break, be it for mental, emotional reasons, for physical reasons, just because there was no external reason to sing. And so it's with all of the different factors that can be up, there is something to, if you feel like singing, absolutely sing, but be careful not to just jump straight in and go. Give yourself a little bit of grace period and make sure that you let your folds move, that you let your body move. For me, in the last couple of years, one thing that I found has helped me just about as much as any specific vocal warm-up has been to warm up my body. Running has really helped. And this isn't for everybody, because I've actually found just the opposite for some people that find that working out and running and things of that nature actually tighten them up and actually really screw with their vocal folds. So again, that is where I say, this is not necessarily for every person. Know thyself. But for me, I found that it's the mind-body connection that needs the warm-up more than the folds themselves. And so taking some time to do that before vocalizing, to take some time and really slow up some of your warm-ups. Do single note hum exercises. Use a semi-occluded vocal tract method, kind of like a straw, or a wacky thing that I had my poor Memphis students do for a year was to use a kazoo, or something that's going to somewhat occlude and give you the opportunity to sort of do a little bit of weightlifting before it is that you go to sing. Doing those things and taking the steps necessary to be able to sing your heavier rep, rather than just jumping right in because you feel like it, because again, the voice is a muscle. And it's like if you go for years and years, and again, this is hyperbole because we've been in this for 6 months, or see also what feels like 30 years. We're in what, March 305th?
Yeah.
So just had to get that right because I could have sworn it was the 304th. When people get older, their vocal folds have the tendency to ossify, and sometimes what you hear in terms of a warble or some inconsistent vibrato comes from literally, with a lack of use, the folds become a little bit less elastic over time, and that again is something that typically impacts older people. So that's an extreme example of how atrophy can set in. Just the same, there are professional opera singers that sing into their 60s and 70s because of regular, consistent use to make sure that those muscles are still working. It's not just how milk was marketed to us to keep our bones from ossifying. It is just a consistent use of the muscle. And the more consistent that is, the more you can kind of keep things moving and keep things also conscious on your end. The quality with which you speak also. So the quality in which you speak on the phone, the quality in which you speak on Zoom to other people, being able to take some time in between and not just if you're on a call and can just give it a rest regularly and not just in one lump sum. Hydrating. There we go. Very, very nice. And just making sure that you're cognizant of how it is that the quality with which you're speaking, the volume to which you're speaking, using resonance instead of volume, which is always something you're going to hear from your voice teachers, is considering that your volume is actually going to come from space and resonance rather than from upping volume, which has the tendency to kind of put some pressure on your folds. The breathing. Are you breathing before you speak, or are you just using the very tail end of what we need to survive? These are all things that contribute to the amount of strain that you may be putting on your voice on the day-to-day. If you can consider those the laundry list of things, and those are just an example of some of the common stuff, then you can be a little bit more cognizant with how to jump in with singing. And that's not a full list as much as it is just an exhaustively basic list of some of the things that we've got going on. A lot of it is awareness. It's if you have a regimen, make sure that you do it. But to build a regimen, like, give yourself something stepwise. Don't start at, okay, the way that I'm going to warm up is to sing through my piece twice, or like to do these gigantic warm-ups to get the big stuff first. Like, really give yourself some time with a single note exercise just to get the breath connected. To do maybe some 3-note exercises, 5-note exercises. Don't shy away from doing slides and to just explore the range and enjoy. I mean, in a lot of ways, for probably many people's lives, what do we have but time right now?
Yeah.
So take that time for your voice, especially if you've been off it for a little while. I'm going to get off my voice for a second and pass over if Ariel, if you've got anything to add.
Just little remnants that I think are worth adding in. Like you were just saying, that we all have, most of us at least, have a little more time than we're used to right now, and a little more flexibility, at least with our time. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of explore what works for you and what gets your voice to a healthy place, right? And so you can take advantage of that by warming up differently, using different warm-ups every day, and seeing what that offers for flexibility for your voice. How do you feel the next day? Do you get tired faster after this warm up, or have more endurance? Those are things that you can do. You can try running and then singing and see if that works for you or not. And just a couple other things that I was thinking about adding in as you were giving your very well informed spiel was, you mentioned at the beginning about how right now, think about if you're speaking even on Zoom or on the phone and how that taxes your voice. I think the flip side of that, something that we talked about the other night, that I realized the other day, was that I didn't realize this the other day, we talked about it the other day. I realized it a couple months ago, that other than teaching voice lessons online and an occasional hang with friends or chat with family, I was barely talking compared to what I used to do, right, out in the world. And my vocal endurance took a big hit, right? I would do my normal warm-ups and jump in singing, and my endurance was not as strong as it was, and it clicked suddenly. Oh, right, maybe that's because I'm barely speaking even. And that's part of your endurance also, right? So whether you're speaking more or the same or less, that's all something to kind of calibrate for and take into consideration. Same with, your mental health, your where you're at with whether it's depression or anxiety or, anything like that, that can all have a huge impact on your voice and your vocal health. And to be really kind to yourself and understanding. I think I do a lot of really emotion-based work with my voice students, and one of the things that I've gathered during this time is that a lot of them are crying a little more than maybe they did before the pandemic, especially at the beginning. That was a big thing, and that was affecting their voices. They were tighter if they were trying to hold back those feelings, and if they let them out, it was a huge release for their voice. And that's just something to be aware of, and just kind of keep track of a little bit, so that you don't get. One thing you want to avoid is adding stress or frustration just because things aren't the way that you expect them to be or aren't the way they used to be, right? Everything is different, and it's different for all of us, and that's okay. But yeah, and just as a side note, I would say, as sort of a vocalist, but more of a layman, not as trained in pedagogy as Dr. Kyle, that good vocal health to me is if my voice works the way that I want it to work, right? And as long as I want it to work. And that's the way that I would define that. And so if I'm not hitting that mark, if I can't sing while I'm cooking dinner for fun, even, let alone like do the rep that I want to do as rehearsal or do a video or whatever that I'm trying to work on, then that's an indicator to me that I'm either not treating myself well, or I'm not preparing well, or there's something in my process that's missing and that I should look into. And it's probably not a significant issue with my voice itself. It's probably just some step that I'm missing. Yeah. That's what I had to add.
Fantastic.
That is great. I mean, just looking at some of the other questions that we have a question from our volunteer. Question. Just making sure I'm reading all of this in the chat. Amanda,
just to follow up, if anyone at any point has any question related to anything we're saying, we'll keep up and we'll be able to cycle through all of that. We'll be happy to keep this as live and interactive as possible.
Yeah. So Jason, who will shortly be featured as your volunteer, but Jason shared in the chat. I'm not sure if anyone else experiences this, but the pressure to appear, as he put in quotes, tough at school and any care for our voices make us seem like, again, in quotes, divas. I've definitely gotten comments, this is in his words, from colleagues when I've expressed the need to take care of my voice after teaching all day. I can relate to that too.
Yeah. I have absolutely experienced like I think you're talking about the pressure to sort of perform even when you know you're not at your best or whatever.
Right.
And I try to explain it to people, especially if they're not vocalists themselves, as Kyle alluded to this, that it's a muscle, right? It's like if you're a runner and you hurt your ankle, the worst thing you could do, I would imagine, I'm not a runner, but I've heard from runners, is to go out and run on that ankle, right? And like treat it like nothing's wrong. It's not gonna make the problem go away. It's just gonna make it get worse. And your voice is exactly the same way. If you are, yeah, and it's helpful for people who aren't singers, right? Because it's hard sometimes to understand. And I understand why it's a struggle to kind of wrap your mind around it. You know, why can't you just do it anyway or whatever? And so usually I'll mark, you know, by really lightly singing something, or just even lip singing, you know, not actually vocalizing, is really useful rehearsal. It's kind of counterintuitive, but if you're thinking about whether there's choreography involved or just the emotion that you're feeling as you would be performing something, that's valuable time for rehearsal. And tightening up the timing with your body to the music, even if your voice isn't involved yet, that's incredibly valuable time. And the hard part, I think, is the conversation with people to try to get them to see where you're coming from. And that's something that gets easier the more you have that conversation. And the other thing that I guess is worth mentioning that won't necessarily solve this problem, but I found really helped me years ago as I was becoming a more regular vocalist, was that stressing about whether I was going to be able to make it through something made it far less likely I would be able to make it through something. And like continually talking to people about how worried I was if I was going to get through. I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, but just my experience was I was always worrying and sharing my worries with people about whether I would be able to get through the song, get through the show, get through whatever. And all day, all week, that's what I would be talking about. And it just ended up in me wasting voice and adding stress and losing sleep and all of this stuff, and people losing some confidence in me also. And the more that I just trusted in myself and marked, confidently said, I'm gonna have to mark tonight when I need to mark, and went for it when I needed to go for it, the change was miraculous. Like it's still astonishing to me how different my life is now versus then. I don't know if Kyle has anything else to add to that.
So marking in and of itself is so tricky, and I actually very rarely do it, but I also attribute that to being a baritone. Like I do have a natural durability that other people don't, because just literally the size of the folds, baritones and basses can get away with some things that sopranos and mezzos can't, and so that's there. And even tenors as well, because literally just it's the size of the folds make them just a bit more durable. That said, it is so much to do with knowing thyself, but more so communicate. When it comes to marking, communicate with the people it matters to. Communicate with your music director, communicate with your colleagues. In a high school setting, I think it can be a little bit dicier and more difficult than a professional setting because of the nature of the different levels of authority and perhaps the different experience bases. But it's important to know that marking is not necessarily just shutting it down entirely. Marking comes in so many different forms. And if you show that you're fully engaged, but just not using your voice 100%, that is any time that you're marking. And marking can come in the form of singing everything, but singing it quietly, like something that you would, especially for a male voice, something that you would sing in your chest voice, singing it in your head voice when it's rangy, or bringing it down an octave and singing it all in a really relative place. But that doesn't mean you can or should mark your consonants. And if you show that you're really if you can show that you're really, that'd be nice if anybody in this room were president instead. If you can show that you are really present in the rehearsal and there in every single way, except your voice is just not gonna go 100%, you are showing that you are hitting your spots and your marks and not just saying, I'm sorry, I can't anything today. Because very rarely is it a necessity, unless you're really kind of like your voice is on death's door. Do you need to completely and totally shut it down? So maybe do something where your vocal capacity is 25% of where it would be, but your consonants are 100%, so people can get your entrances and exits, and you can still be discernible. There is a benefit to not singing full out necessarily. And there are rehearsals where it will be a lot easier to tell someone that you're marking, like a tech rehearsal, and rehearsals when you will definitely get more pushback from anybody in the business or on down, like a Zitz probe or or like a last dress where you're trying to feel out balances. And just knowing that going in, you can even prioritize your process through an a cappella rehearsal process or a musical theater rehearsal process, where you know when strategically you'll need to turn it on versus when you can't, if you do find yourself in a situation where preservation is key. And when preservation is key, like Ariel said, the stress and strain that you can put on yourself is perhaps more detrimental than any other environmental factor. I meant to say this earlier because I didn't say enough. I meant to say this earlier. Whether you think you can put that in your body or not put that in your body before singing, you're right. What I mean by that is, if you think you can't have dairy for 72 hours before you sing, you're right. If you need to have that coffee right before singing or you're not going to perform, you're right. Because the bottom line is, this is working probably even more importantly than this. I personally, you see me right now, it is 8:35 p.m. Eastern, and I have a giant cold brew from Dunkin' Donuts, because that gets me going. And you know what? I would do the same if I were singing. That's for me. That's not necessarily going to work or not work for anybody else. There is a placebo element to it, but whatever it is that's going to get you to work or not to work, know thyself. I say it again. And if there's a food that you need to avoid, if you need to steam between shows in a double, whatever it is for you, be good to yourself in that and give yourself what it is that you need. Take care of yourself in those ways, because you can just very easily uncenter and decenter yourself. Do the chill exercises. Find ways to get it, like before deciding that your voice is gone or it is unusable. Find little ways to slow this and slow this down as much as you can, and do the extra step warm-ups. Do the ones that maybe on a day when you're rushed you would skip that step to get things rolling. And
Yeah.
that's in an extreme situation. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think also being aware of, what we talked about before, all of the other things that we do that affect our voice, right? And what you can do to have some control over that. So whether it's, I've had, when I spent 7 or 8 years singing with a funk soul band here, that when we had a break between sets, I was pretty adamant, if my voice was at all not feeling good, I wouldn't go out and mingle in between the sets, because I knew it was going to be loud. I was going to have to scream to like communicate with people. I didn't want to be rude and not communicate with people. So I just would kind of like be in the green room or whatever, or outside kind of hanging out, waiting for us to go back on. And that's totally legitimate. And after the show's over, if I feel the need, I can explain to people why I made that choice. Or, my band all knew by the time that I'd done it a handful of times why I was doing that. And, people will adapt. And I think the more you know, like Kyle says, the more you know thyself, the stronger you can be to just support yourself and do what you need, and do it without hurting anyone else, right? There's always got to be some awareness of what other people need to get their stuff done too. And yeah, people will adjust around you.
Do what it is that you need to do, but also I suppose the less The less fun part of the answer is do what you need to do and be confident in that and communicate it with everyone. But also, there is the potential to be a diva about vocal rest. I feel like I have made a bigger deal in college forever ago. I've made a bigger deal of vocal rest than I've had to also. Showing up with the whiteboard and the gimmicky, like, this is how I'm talking to people today, probably not something you need to do. And so there are ways to do. I was that guy. I hate to say I was that guy. I mean, yeah, 7th grade, not freshman year of college. Yeah, totally. No, don't worry about it. But that's to say, there are ways to do it that is professional and what it is that you need. Communicate with people and say, hey, not really going to use my voice today because I'm on a day of vocal rest, or like to use it some by using consonants, and to be confident in that if people give you a hard time, versus making a whole show of it. There are different ways to do vocal rest, but trust in what it is that you need and just do what it is that you need.
And I assume that it's common knowledge, but just in case it's not, Kyle, correct me if this is just an old wives' tale, but I still go by the rule not that whispering will hurt your voice more than anything else. So if your voice is not doing well, sometimes the instinct is to just speak really quietly and like whisper, and that is not necessarily the solution, right? Better to kind of speak higher in your higher register and more sing-songy, and that will actually be the healthiest way to speak if you need to, if you're really, really hurting.
Totally second that and back that up. It's the use of the false folds and the lack of synchronicity in symmetry in the vocal folds usage when whispering. So it's building rougher habits and not necessarily actually using the folds much less. So yes, to speak in a breathier and less maybe normal or present part of your voice, but to get back to sort of the put on your NPR voice. And to maybe just pare it back and be extra careful. Sometimes when I've had to, and this is a had to do some singing when I'm sick, that survival mode singing has been some of my healthier singing because I can't do any of the, I have to, in order to make the sound happen, I've had to really, really lean into technique in that survival mode. Now, it is very rare now, especially in my life, that there is a situation where I'd say I have to go. And in most cases, if you could possibly shut it down to get it back and going, do. But to vocalize just a little. And I personally am generally, unless it is a real, like, it's ragged and it's barely there situation, or a doctor has told you otherwise, I very rarely go a full day complete vocal rest. What I would do is just to like do some very light and very intentional humming to get the folds moving and to maybe shake off some of the crud and to get things to warm up every once in a while, but not much more than that. Just some use, and its atrophy is not something that you would worry about, but just for me personally, again, that is a me thing. 24 hours without using it is also just fine, but just to sort of like feel out what it is to get the folds moving every once in a while as a check-in.
Great. I think we'll shift gears here and bring our volunteer. Well, we have one question. I'll let Ariel field this question really quick because it just came in, and then we'll shift gears to the masterclass portion with Jason. So this is a question for Ariel, and this question says, what are some routines that you have before a performance to prepare your body and mind?
It's basically everything we've been talking about. I mean, really visualizing success is kind of a silly thing sounding, but it's really powerful in actuality. And trusting myself has been the game changer. I mean, really 5 or 6 years ago, I think one of my friends in the Funks, Rob Dietz, I'm sure everybody is excited, Rob Dietz, was like, I just used to stress so much before any performance. I would take at least a week off of any alcohol or anything, because I just had this deep-seated belief that my voice could not get through a show. And it just made it harder. And he kind of clued me in to just like relax and do your thing, and it's gonna work for you. You know, you've got what you need. And it really changed everything for me. I'm really grateful to him for that conversation. And yeah, I drink a lot of water. I try to get some good sleep the day or two before, because the night before, first of all, not a guarantee. And second of all, probably not enough time to necessarily get you in a good headspace or body space. And when I have certain superstitions. I like to go through my lyrics and stuff every time before a show, even if I know the song forward and backward. I've sung it 100 times. I just like to make sure it's in my brain again. Sometimes I'll write out the lyrics right before a show, just because that process makes me feel really confident. Anything that I can do that makes me feel really secure is valuable to me. And some of the I have a handful of warm-ups I do. My band is, everybody knew I was coming if they heard a siren, because that would be if I could only do one thing, if we had a set break, it would be a siren in the set break, just to like make sure my high end was still kind of feeling flexible and there was nothing settling in up there. But I certainly have a range of warm-ups that I like to choose from depending on how my voice is feeling that day. And usually I'll start with something kind of high and hummy, just to kind of get things moving, and then work more into my chest and belt and things like that. And I have also, as I've gained more vocal health and endurance and knowledge of my voice, I employ my mix so much more than I used to. I think that I used to be really reliant on my belt solely, and that's okay. But I have light years more endurance by using a little mix in there, so that I'm not just blasting all the time. And I also am a fan of the sound that has come from that shift.
So are we.
Yeah, I'm glad. And yeah, I think just kind of trying to feel low stress and confident, and whatever those superstitions are for you. I mean, I reference my band a lot because that was my most regular performance avenue for almost a decade. And when I started, I did the very strict 1 week before, no any kind of substances or anything that would maybe mess with my voice. And by the time I finished, I had a pretty strict rule of nothing during the show or before the show, just because not only was I worried it would affect my voice, like the placebo effect, right? I'm sure that in rehearsals I would have a beer or two and it wouldn't do anything to my voice. It was fine, right? But in performances, I very strongly felt that, like, what if I make a mistake and then I'll just be so mad at myself that I had that beer, because it'll be the beer's fault and whatever. And it just wasn't worth adding that stress and that extra level of questioning myself the whole time. Archie, sorry. And lastly, I think a big thing that changed as I sang really regularly, I'm sorry, there's neighbors, you guys, it's dangerous on these streets, was the idea that making a mistake, whether it's a lyric flub or the wrong note or anything like that, is Archie, enough, is one mistake, and you can shake it off and move forward, and it doesn't have to be dragged along with you the whole time. You can meet Archie at the end if you want. And that was a huge shift. I think that, a lot of us, especially in a cappella, I find, versus the people I've sung with in bands and musical theater, I think a lot of a cappella singers are to, in a good way, very perfectionist, and want to be exact and perfect. And there's so much value in that, except for when it means that we are hard on ourselves when we make a mistake and we don't let go of those mistakes, and it kind of weighs you down as you keep going through a show, or through a song or anything. And so that was a big learning moment for me, that, it's just a moment. Probably nobody else noticed anything anyway. And you're human, and you just get to keep going. and show them on the next song how rockin' and amazing you are, and make them forget that if they even heard it, they'll forget it by the end, right? Yeah, I don't know. If you have any other specific questions, I'm happy to answer, but that's kind of my thought process.
Excellent. All right. Well, Jason, if you could kindly unmute yourself and say hello, we're going to shift gears to, thank you once again, Jason, for volunteering. And Ariel and Kyle, I am going to, let the two of you work with Jason with whatever you have planned for us to, watch you do with Jason. So.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. So, what would you like me to do?
I mean, a verse chorus of anything that you are excited about is a good place to start. I don't know if Kyle has any more specific requests.
Could I sing a chorus from something I'm working on right now?
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
Cool. Honesty is such a lonely word. Everyone is so untrue. Honesty is hardly ever heard, and mostly what I need from you.
That was lovely.
Yay.
Okay, I think I'm gonna jump in and do kind of my thing, and then Kyle's gonna jump in and do his thing. So I'm gonna focus a little bit more on performance and emotional connectedness. That's kind of my bent. And first of all, your voice is lovely, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, thanks.
And I have a question for you. Do you recall where you were looking during that? What your eyes
I
were
had
doing?
my eyes closed for most of it.
Yeah. And do you feel like they're usually closed when you sing?
It depends on how terrified I am at the moment, just how nervous I am. Also, sometimes like if I have to quick engage into a song, it helps me to close my eyes, at least in the beginning, just to sort of like be able to clear out everything in the space.
That makes sense. Cool. So I definitely understand the quick engage aspect of it. And I also understand the nervous aspect, but I want to challenge that a little bit, because I think that our instinct as human beings, as singers, maybe just specifically to human beings, is when we're nervous, right? We want to kind of hide ourselves, not be seen as much. And obviously, if you're singing for anyone, you're not hidden, right? You're totally on display. Everybody can hear you and see you, and that's a given. So I think that something that's hard to do via Zoom, but that I'm gonna challenge you to like pick a spot on your wall behind your computer or up above your computer or something like that, is to pick a spot and think about a specific person that you're gonna sing this to. I don't know if you've ever thought about that with this song. Do you have any sense of, you don't have to like name their name, but a type of relationship or a person that you're thinking about?
I think so. I go back and forth with who it is and sort of the purpose or the intention.
Sure. Yeah. So for this exercise, can you pick whichever one feels strongest right now?
Yes.
And there's this funny thing that happens with eye contact, which I'm gonna attempt to give an example of on Zoom, which is I'll do it with you, Jason, is that if I am standing here making eye contact with you, you, in reality at least, pretty much don't have the option to look away until I decide to allow you to look away, right? I mean, it's a thing that happens in a room together where whoever is on stage, whoever has the floor, right, they really have all of the power. And it's counterintuitive because we think that, oh, if we close our eyes, then we do get this internal feeling, right? There's nothing wrong with having that moment, but the act of doing that for too long will shut out the audience. And instead you can command them to feel whatever you want them to feel by making this eye contact with them. And you can choose when you look at each person and when you allow them to look away, right? It's a power move. I'm a big fan of it, if I'm honest. There was rarely a show with any group that other than musical theater, where you obviously are rarely breaking the fourth wall, where somebody wouldn't come up to me afterwards and be like, oh my God, you were singing that song to me. You were looking at me. And it's like, no, I was, connecting with everybody, but I'm glad that you felt that way. I didn't tell them no, but that's a thing that I want you to try out right now, is to try it again. Think about who you're singing to, where you are, what just happened, right? I try to treat songs kind of like monologues. So even if you have no acting background, you can kind of think about what happened right before this that made it have to be said. Why do I have to get this out to this person, this message? And how are they reacting to me? Like, even if the audience can't see them, even if you can't actually see them reacting to you, if you know who you're singing to, you can imagine their reaction. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Can we try it one more time? And you take a second, and you can start with your eyes closed if you need to, but try to pick a spot where they are, where their eyes are, and that's who you're singing to.
Okay. Honesty is such a lonely word. Everyone is so untrue. Honesty is hardly ever heard. Mostly what I need from you.
Did that feel any different for you?
I mean, I was less in my own head and less about like what I'm doing and what I'm thinking, and more about what I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah, I felt that also. I got goosebumps that time. Amanda also get. What you just said is actually exactly what I try to do with my vocal coaching, which is I bring in the Meisner acting technique, which is all about, if you're not familiar, it's really all about getting the focus off of yourself and onto your partner, right? And just reacting off of your partner. And so in singing, it's a little bit of a mind jump, right? But we're reacting to this imaginary person that we have chosen. We know exactly who we're singing to and how they're reacting to us with each song that we do. And that doesn't mean that it's always the same person for every song, or that every time you do a song it's the same person, right? It actually gives you so much flexibility, because a song about love or whatever, right? One day I could be in love with someone and I'm singing it to them in my mind, and the next day we broke up, and now it's a little bit of a different vibe, right? I'm either singing about love longingly because I'm still thinking about that person, or I'm thinking about, oh, I'm singing this to my my brother who I love so much, and it's a different type of love that I'm singing about, right? But having something specific, someone specific that you're singing to in your head is going to immediately take your brain away from all of the nerves, or at least most of the nerves that you're feeling, and like, instead of worrying about what your hand is doing, right? Which is something my brain used to be consumed by 90% of the time that I was singing back in college. And instead, now I'm just thinking about, oh, am I getting this communicated? How are they reacting to me? And how is that impacting me? And how will that inform the next line? So that's just like a really quick little introduction to the idea of kind of, the workshop that I used to teach at a cappella festivals, Sing It Like You Mean It, is really all about thinking about each song like a monologue, and it allows for so much more flexibility, because you just get to decide, today I'm singing to my dog Archie, and he's making me feel kind of silly, so today it's a silly song, but as long as the audience will understand it, and they'll feel so much more, instead of, sometimes there can be an impressive riff or something, but if it's not informed by emotion, then it's kind of technically cool, but there's no power behind it. There's no memory that I'm left with to see that you experienced when you did it. So I know we're on a time limit, so I'm going to pass it over to Kyle to jump in. And thanks, Jason. That was great.
First of all, if we do get an opportunity to have festivals again where she teaches that Sing It Like You Mean It workshop, go, run, don't walk. It's fantastic. I went in 2014 whenever I went to that Jam. Stellar and very well attended because it's fantastic. Jason, few things. First of all, thank you for singing Billy Joel. It just warms up my Long Island heart. Second of all, you have a wonderful tone to your instrument and great control over it. So I only have some like two little brief things that I'd like to have you ponder and try. And so those two things are, it's very easy to take in, and this is something that I guess I meant to get into in the general part of the workshop, and that is when we listen to an artist on a recording, we take in a lot of information from them. We take in a lot of information from their tone, from their approach, from their accent, from their vowels, from their phrasing. Whether we know it or not, we're taking in more than that. We're also taking in compression, some studio effects that we don't know are happening, some leveling things that like the voices ultimately don't produce. They don't actually produce what we ultimately hear in a recording, and it is something to keep in mind when assessing a sound live versus assessing a sound that you hear in a recording. There may be some things that are difficult or essentially impossible to totally recreate, and there are some lovely things in your rendition that are absolutely and totally yours, and there are little shadings of things that are Billy's. And in particular, I think I noticed with some of your vowel onsets that they are a little on the hard side, as Billy's are, and him not he being a little bit more raw of a vocalist. That is very standard Joel, that are not necessary, and perhaps even a little healthier if you don't necessarily include the harsher onset to maybe make them a little bit more balanced. And so the things that I have to suggest to you are these. I think that it will help your expressivity if you keep the sound entirely connected until you breathe. So honesty is such a lonely word. All of that was one breath with no gap time in between. And the big difficult part about that will require perhaps some practicing is really connecting that big leap. Is such a lonely word. The important thing about that high note is it is just as successful as the lower note below it, because if you're reaching for that high note with a gap in between, it's more difficult than if you've got an anchor of through line to go through. So through line, unless you're breathing, and then you breathe and you start another through line. It will also help your control towards going towards a word in your expressivity. The other thing, and because it's such a short thing, I don't have much of a difficulty giving you two things. The other thing is when you are starting a new phrase and a new vowel, so you can think of these things in sequence. If you breathe into the same vowel space you're about to sing out of, you save yourself a step. Now, what I mean by that is, and mostly, let's say, and mostly what I need from you, right? Your last line, instead of going, and mostly what I need. So like you breathe into this space and then you have to change it when you go to sing. What if you just took out the middleman and breathed into the schwa of and mostly what I need from you, like, again, none of the right pitches, but the idea being, if you breathe into the vowel you're about to sing, like the second line, everyone is so untrue. If you breathe into an you sing right out of that and you're already set rather than having to reset it again. Do those things make sense?
Yes.
So singing through line when you're singing, and then for your breath, breathe into the vowel you're about to sing out next. This song actually is advantageous because your breath time is long. So you have quite a bit of time to take the breath in. So try the whole excerpt again, considering those two things, through line and breathing into the vowel you're about to sing.
Okay. Honesty is such a lonely word. Everyone is so untrue. Honesty is hardly ever heard, and mostly what I need from you.
Excellent, Jason. Very good. Just it helps the efficiency of everything, and I hope that you find a little bit more ease in keeping all of those things going through. And big jumps like that require a little bit of practice. But again, already the consistency of those notes, they don't feel like you're reaching quite as much for them, and you've shaded back some of the harsher onsets for your vowels just a little bit, just by coming at it from a place of breath that is more efficient. Wonderful.
Yeah, it didn't feel like I had to work as hard that time at all.
It sounded that way as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. And that's and it's great that it felt that way, because it did read out here like that for sure. Wonderful. Great work.
Thank you.
Thanks for being brave and
yes.
Thank you
thanks
for
volunteering. Yeah. Well, one final question to take this from a lot of discussion on the individual, to just wrap up this discussion with the thought that I think is weighing on many of our minds. This whole idea that will we, not the question isn't will we ever get to sing together as in groups. I think we all know that is in the someday down the road. But as we all eventually get to return to group singing, and I know there's at least one educator, that is a guest, and I have a music education background as well, but I'd love to hear the two of you weigh in on the idea of what sort of group exercises, group explorations can groups who've now not sung for a really, really long time, like is it just like throwing, I think it's more than just throwing ourselves back into what we had done before. So what are your thoughts on group singing and how we kind of bring ourselves back to that? Who's going first?
Something quick, because I think that Kyle has a more significant thing to add to this. But I would say that just to keep in mind the value of, I know we're talking about singing, but there is value also in doing like improv exercises together, acting challenges together. There's so many ways that you can connect and build on a group's connection that don't involve singing, and that can start happening sooner than when we can healthily and safely sing in the same space. And some of that can happen on Zoom or online, and some of that could happen outdoors or in really large spaces with masks, and even without speaking, right? I mean, there's so many exercises that you can do, like just feeling connected, as long as everybody washes their hands really well before and after. Those things are of value as well, and maintaining the emotional connection with your group is going to be really valuable in being able to come back running when we are able to do that. I'm going to leave kind of the suggestions about rehearsal to Kyle. We had a conversation about this the other day, and he taught me a few things about it.
Well, she already knows how not sexy this answer is. So I have a lot of thoughts on the idea of group exercises. Unfortunately, the preface to all of this is to say we can't fabricate group exercises right now over virtually, right. and it is so difficult. And I have to preface by saying I feel for any educator of any ensemble right now to figure out how to make a choral or a cappella class or rehearsal work and be effective in a way that helps students grow. It must be very difficult, and I urge you to give yourselves grace through the growth that has to come from either completely virtual classes or a mix, and the bureaucratic red tape that must come with school districts. Have to say all of that. It must be a nightmare, and I truly can't imagine it. That said, I wanted to make sure to slip in that thing about the virtual transmission and what it is that we hear, because in any situation where we are distanced and doing any kind of group or trying to match any kind of pitch or vowel exercises, keep in mind you're going through a filter no matter what technology you're using to do it. There are natural things that our ear picks up that is phenomenal and magical about being in the same room with people, feeling their energy, hearing their timbre, it going through how it is that you personally, your aesthetic reacts with that timbre, and tweaking vowels to have better pitch, and to like the superpowers involved in the acoustics of creating music through a vocal ensemble it is just that, magic, and not as copyable, no, repeatable in the virtual setting. In discussing trying to do things, even matching a vowel over Zoom is simply not possible with the way that sounds compete with each other, and you just have a cacophony of competing sounds and nothing really useful. It's not like you can really even build chords via Zoom. That said, there are some creative things that are happening right now in the world in terms of socially distanced rehearsals with people in cars with the proper equipment. It's kind of incredible what people are doing by setting up a sound system, and everybody, like, sort of some people using their radio to cut latency, and still being roughly in person. There are some groups in some places that are doing outdoor rehearsals with appropriate distance and masks. If things that can help that along are acoustically sound spaces like against a wall, that might help with that, because again, if anybody has ever experienced that marching band effect, where if you're too far away from somebody, you just get that natural air latency that causes timing to really be difficult, and so there's more impetus or onus on a conductor to actually sing. Again, being really certain to be safe. As far as things that you can do, I think a lot of it might come down to the music director, perhaps crafting tracks and things that students can listen to a track and then maybe build a harmony part on top of, and then take in how one might be able to 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 harmonize or to blend with somebody else in what they're listening to. If you have a really pared back and very clear bass, that if you want somebody to lay down a harmony on top of it, they can then do that with the proper instructions, and then the director then can get the recording back and assess how that lining up happens, and just giving someone the exercise. One thing that I just did in a class of mine is I laid down background tracks for musical theater songs, and essentially to build a background chorus of myself. And that was an exercise in, can I be consistent enough with rhythms? Can I be consistent enough with my tone? Or if I'm looking to specifically create what sounds like a unison chorus, can I challenge myself to do little tweaks so I sound like a different guy each time and create like a something slightly different? That can be perhaps effective. The other thing is, in terms of lessons, is if you trust the students enough and do something that doesn't involve a certain amount of risk, you can come up with exercises that you as the instructor give them to do over Zoom, but have them all muted, and like warm-ups and other exercises like that, and perhaps even something where if you have something that you want them to do in real time, have two devices, have them do it while muted on Zoom, but have it captured from their phone or another device, and then have all of that get sent into you for assessment. That, I think, ultimately ends up being the safest, and something that you can, while not in the moment, can assess in pretty short order. As far as what kinds of exercises, that's sort of up to the ensemble themselves. But that is unfortunately unfortunately sort of what we're left with, and to sort of fabricate that it's any better or any replaceable than that is perhaps cheating the magic that is the in-person. Please feel free to add anything that you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's a little bit roundabout, but I think even just if you're a group that's gonna plan to come back and sing together and you're working on repertoire and stuff, I think that there's so many conversations that I at least hope groups are having about their repertoire, and those are some things that can start before you get together for singing rehearsal, right? And that's a way to connect now and to save singing time later, right? Save vocal strain later by not wasting time singing a song 20 times and then having a discussion about what does this song mean to us? What are we trying to, say with this song? Have that conversation now, and really, like there's so many ways that you can connect and improve your performance and hone what you're doing without being together physically, so that when you are able to be together physically, you can really focus on singing and healthy singing. And I just thought I would throw that in.
And there's no reason why you can't learn and memorize your music now.
True that.
Assuming that it wasn't something that you were woodshedding as a group and as a unit. I mean, you can have those discussions, but I mean, bottom line is this can just be a time to really get music going.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Practice tests and assessment, like having deadlines for producing learned parts and sending them to an instructor or to a music director. That certainly is something that you can work towards. So there is still musical learning and assimilation and assessment, and then from there, especially if it's a video, you can even give feedback on technique things that you can do to do better.
Yeah. And I think something we kind of had discussed the other day that hasn't really come up, but I'm just going to throw in there, is the idea that if people are able to do recording right now and learn some microphone technique, that is super valuable, and also can help you learn healthy singing off mic, because really one of the big things that you'll realize when you do some studio singing is that probably a lot of the time that you were singing in not amplified situations, especially in like a cappella and stuff like that, you might have been really straining and pushing a lot, and it's interesting to start to learn where your voice naturally wants to be and what feels really healthy and possible to be long lasting, and learn some better healthy technique. So, yeah.
Well, this was a great way to wrap up this discussion, and for a variety of reasons, but also because our next webinar event is on the idea of the socially distanced rehearsal. So some of the things that Kyle mentioned in regard to the folks who are getting together and rehearsing in their cars and pulling in their radio, you talking about microphone technique, like these are all things that are going to be instrumental in our next discussion in a couple of weeks. So thank you for helping us round that all out and kind of providing a really nice segue for what we're moving into in a short amount of time. From there, I just want to give a big thank you and, virtual, how I've seen a variety of different ways people are throwing their claps into the air for both you, Ariel, and you, Kyle, for providing your expertise and a really great discussion this evening. And Jason, to you for being a phenomenal volunteer. It was lovely to hear you sing. And thank you, of course, to our participants for being a part of this with us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you all at future events. So thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It. Yeah.
Of course.
And Jason, here's Archie. Look, good.
Oh,
there you go. As promised.
Oh my God.